The question is, how do you move toward thought? So this came from a comment under one of my videos. Somebody was wondering, when I talk about moving toward thought or investigating thought directly or experiencing or touching thought directly, what do I mean? And they went on to ask, do I mean to visualize thought, or do I mean to think about thought, or what? That was the question. So first of all, I want to say what I mean is decidedly not visualizing, and it's also decidedly not thinking about thought. So if you're thinking about thought as such, if you're thinking, oh, well, what is a thought? Is a thought this, or is it that? Or so-and-so says a thought is this, and this philosopher says that, and neuroscience says this. That is thinking, right? That is conceptualizing. So that is just essentially a sequence of thoughts, one after another, and you're just kind of caught up in the thought stream. That's the typical way the mind is functioning when we're identified with thought or identified with our minds. And the next part of the question was, is it visualizing thoughts, like imagining thoughts, visualizing thoughts? It's not at all. Similarly, if you are actually visualizing something or holding something in your mind in the way that we usually talk about visualizing or maybe even daydreaming, in a sense, you're actually holding distance from the thought. You're doing kind of the opposite, right? Now, that's closer because if there is a sense of the thought slowing down or becoming still, at least it's not completely identified in a stream of thoughts or a chain of thoughts, but it's still probably being experienced as an object. The thought will be appearing to you as an object to your sense of being a subject as the thinker, right? So now understand, as I'm describing this or talking about this, I'm not trying to teach you something. I'm trying to point you to how to experience it yourself right now. So if you have to rewatch the video, then rewatch the video, but try to follow along with what I'm saying and just touch into this experience. Because when you really do, it can make a huge difference. I've worked with people face to face and gone through this slowly with them and seen the surprise in their face when they finally realize what I'm actually talking about, and seen significant shifts like instantaneously when this is clear. So when you're recognizing thought as such, like in this moment, if you're noticing a thought of any kind, and then I tell you, what is that thought made of? Or I ask you, what is that thought made of? Or I tell you, try to experientially investigate the thought itself. It's as if I'm asking you, without conceptualizing, how do you know there's a thought there, right? Without adding more thoughts to the stream, what is it that makes you recognize that there's a thought functioning at all, right? Look into your experience right now. Recognize it. Is there something reaching out toward a thought? Is there a visualized image of a thought at a distance, like a cloud or like some words or a visual image? Does it appear to be at a distance? Now, if that's the case, that's okay. But I want to ask you, well, what is it that makes it possible to even know that thought is there at all? Right? Part of the answer to that is recognizing what is the thought made out of experientially. Is it actually at a distance? Or is distance another thought? Right? Are you imagining distance? And if you're imagining distance, that's the next thought, right? The question really ultimately points to where or what are you thinking from? What is the experience of the one that's the thinker here? What is the experience of the one that's hearing this, that's receiving this information? And is it apart from any thought? Is it apart from the thought stuff? Is the sense of being a thinker, is the sense of being aware apart from any seeming object of thought at all? And you could say there are sort of two ways to recognize that. Well, probably more like three. But one of them is to kind of move toward the thought and realize, well, whatever it is that moved toward the thought didn't really move anywhere. The thought is seamless with the one moving toward it, or the seeming awareness of it, let's say. another way is to kind of settle back into that sense of subjectivity, the sense of I, the sense of the thinker, and recognize from that that's all that's going on. That's the whole game, right? It's the only game in town, is the sense of the thinker arising with and as the sense of the thought. They are not inseparable. They're not two at all. The only thing that can make anything appear as dualistic is another thought, like an image thought, where you believe the content of the thought. Content in contrast to the form or direct experience of the thought, right? That distinction is made in many ways. The screen and the movie on the screen, right? The ocean and the wave. So the substance of thinking or knowing or being is all seamless. The object and the seeming object that appears because of this reflective nature of the thought and of the mind, the seeming object that appears itself has a sort of usually narrative to it, or it has a sense of being structured or having a certain content. That quality itself is what makes it feel like an object. It makes it feel like something else, something separate. But what is it that knows this, right? The knowingness of it. The knowingness of the thought is the thought. The knowingness of the thinker is the thinker. It's all the seamless one. So those are kind of two ways to approach it. And like I said, there's actually three ways. The third way is for this to just suddenly hit you. It hits you over the head like, whoa, what just happened? Where all of a sudden that seamless experience of knowingness or consciousness is just revealed. It's just obvious. It's just like, shit, that's it. Every thought has been this. Every thought I've ever had has been this. Always has, always will be. Every thought, every doubt, every concept, every image, it's all just this. The sense of the thinker is this. Any sense of I, any iteration of I or me is this. Even any sense of you, it is this. It's all seamless. But the knowingness of it is the key, because it's not at a distance, and it's not an object, and it's not a narrative, and it's not a concept, right? Because any of these words I say can become narratives and concepts, because that's how thoughts function. But at some point it will click that what I'm talking about is not the narrative. What I'm talking about is not the concept. What I'm talking about is not an image in the mind. What I'm talking about is not a story in the mind or a voice in the mind. In a sense, it's the whole mechanism, until you realize to even call it a mechanism is to take it more seriously than is necessary. To take the mechanism seriously, I mean, to see that there is nothing subjectifying or pulling back into a sense of separate me, and there's nothing objectifying or pushing an object of experience outward that we call a thought, that we're calling a thought. When you see that none of that's really happening, it can't actually happen, then it's really kind of funny, because there's nowhere to go. There's just this, and it's just simple, pure, undeniable, homogeneous knowing. Or it may feel like being, but there aren't two things. There aren't two experiences. There's not a subject and object split in this space of knowing, thinking, etc. So that's my kind of complete answer to what does it mean to move toward thought. Well, to move toward thought, you have to realize the nature of thought itself, and or become curious about its substance, its sort of texture, and or become curious about, why do we even know it's there? What makes it possible to know a thought? Well, the knowingness is it. That's it. Nothing more, nothing less. What makes it possible to know you? Just the knowingness of you. That's it. Any belief about yourself is a thought, right? It's not what you are. It's a thought, right? And that thought's no more or real, important, or true, or anything, right, than any other thought. Just because it seems like it's about you as a concept here, right? So what you take yourself to be is a thought. The you that's a concept is a thought. And yet there's something far more obvious, far more close, far more undifferentiated, simple, something you don't have to discover because it's already here. It's already the case. So there's not even a backward step to take. There's no forward step. There's no backward step. The other possibility is the mind just stops right now, stops long enough for this to become clear. And once it's clear, it stays clear. all kinds of stuff happens after awakening, but the clarity of what is realized during awakening will remain, is what I find.